All right, everybody, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. If everyone is ready, clerk, whenever you're ready.
Mayor Jason Holland,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Mark Taylor,
Here.
Commissioner Brownlow,
Here.
Commissioner Sanderson,
Here.
Commissioner Sawyer,
Here.
Commissioner Wooten.
Here. Thank you, ma'am. Please bow your heads. Dear Lord, thank you for the opportunity to be here today to come together and discuss items that will be beneficial to the town as a whole. May we keep servant hearts and fairness in mind at all times. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Please stand and face our flag for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, item number 4 would be the adoption of the agenda. Is there a motion to adopt?
Motion to adopt.
Commissioner Brownlow with the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion is carried. Item number 6 will be the discussion of legal services. I don't have a green sheet here, so I'll just, guess we'll open it up to the board. There was some discussion amongst the board here and there about our most recent legal services, the possibility of exploring other options. So I'm going to sit back, be quiet for a minute, and let you guys talk. I will ask, not that I'm worried about it, but one at a time. We'll have a good conversation and hopefully get some productivity out of it. So, I'm done. Y'all carry on.
Well, I'll start on this end over here then. I just want to reach out to the other board members and try to determine some kind of protocol. I was looking through all the charges and expenses that we had over the last year or so that Matt provided to all of us and stuff. And I think it's to moving forward that we need to act as one as far as when we're talking to legal counsel, because when one's calling or two's calling, it could be multiple charges that pop up for us, and it costs the town too much money that way. So I think we should come to some kind of terms that we're going to talk among ourselves if there's a question to come up, and if we think if we can solve it among ourselves, and then we decide as a group we don't need legal advice on it, we'll move forward. If we can't, we've got a very talented staff and manager that we could reach out for them and ask the next question. And if we still can't come to terms on it, I think we should work through the mayor as our center point. He's the leader of the board, and ask him to ask the question that we ask as a group. I think that would save us a lot of money down the road. I saw a lot of charges that, you know, here and there, 30, 40, 50 bucks that for a single call or a question that we need to, we might be able not even have to make that phone call if we just use the resources we got. So I just want to put a proposal out there on that part of it. We can talk about that. That was one of the things I was wanting to talk about today on the meeting.
Okay. We'll kind of mesh 6 and 7 together. I think that's closer to 7, but duly noted, definitely open for discussion. Like I said, I'm going to let you men and women talk about it. We need to clarify, the meeting was called to discuss legal services, where we're going to get them, who we're going to get them from, how much you're willing to pay for them, that kind of stuff. And then item 7 would be protocol for contacting legal, regardless of who our representative counsel ends up being, controlling the cost on our end, not just what the attorney costs per hour, per year, or whatever, but controlling those costs. So just to reiterate and clarify why we're here.
And can I continue, Mayor?
Yes, sir, please.
Yeah, and my next thing I'd like to do is the way the last meeting took place with the motion and stuff, I wasn't prepared for it. It was it came up a little bit quick for me, not being able to study like the notes and stuff I got now and everything else. So I would like to rescind my vote for legal counsel at this time on my vote also. I don't know how that works, but I voted yes for it, and it wasn't the right thing for me to do with not being able to study these sheets and look over it. And I spoke too soon, and for that I apologize to this board for not for jumping the gun on that vote. So, and to the people of Emerald Isle for doing that. So,
I'd like to put in a little bit of feedback with what you just said. Mine was the same way. I think that the worst, do I think that we need to, always look for ways to save money 100%? I think the way that that went down the other night, I've been getting a lot of negative feedback about it. Like I say, I've had people come in the restaurant and that was bullyish, which wasn't my plan coming up here. Like I say, I've always said that I'm coming up here trying to do what's best for the town. The other night, I think we looked very unprofessional. Not saying it was anyone's fault. I'm just saying that we've got to come up with a better procedure of communicating with each other. Like you said, you found out about it 10 minutes before you walked into a meeting. That's unprofessional. I just think we looked bad the other night, the way that whole thing went down. And I don't know if it's because certain people don't want to reach out to certain people and ask for advice, but I think that should have been something that, hey, what's the best way for us to do this? Not doing it in a way where we're technically look like we're trying to fire the attorney in front of the whole town without the attorney knowing anything. I said when I sat in this seat that I was the only one that had to go home and sleep with myself at night. I didn't feel like a great person for how that went down. So if there's a way we can talk about in the future, before we come into a meeting and call somebody out like that in public, there's got to be a better way to do it. And I felt bad the other night for how we did that. I felt it made us look very, I don't know the word I'm looking for, but I just felt like it was very bullyish to just the way it all went down. I don't know if we should have brought Matt in on this and said, hey, we want to save the town money. What's the best way to do that? We think we should look into other alternatives for attorneys. I think we could have come up with a better way than just coming up here and at the end of a meeting with everyone watching on TV being like, we want a new town attorney. We've already got one in mind. I just think we could have, and I went along with it. So I'm just as guilty as anyone else. But I think going in the future, we got to find a better way to communicate with everybody so that we're not coming in here and, like I say, blindsiding Alicia, blindsiding Mark. They had no clue. I think, Mark, you were just looking at, okay, cool, we're just going to look into alternatives. I think we could have got that out there without doing it in front of the whole town. I just kind of feel bad about how the whole thing went down.
I'll speak. I think that's fair, and I appreciate your observations, and I apologize if I put anybody in a tight spot. This is one of the topics I had hoped to talk about at the budget workshop, but having not submitted a question about it, it seemed like we moved on from cost-cutting questions and went straight to fees. And it was the last opportunity where we were all collectively together before the end of our fiscal year to address a significant element of cost. And I had heard folks that took the time to scroll through the budget and look at the significant increases. It seemed like a natural opportunity to find a little bit of savings. I like what Mr. Taylor said about having some general guidelines that we all follow about how to reach out to attorneys, as long as we're not precluding ourselves from getting advice when we need it. Having a structured set of procedures that we typically follow makes a whole lot of sense to me. So I think it is a good suggestion that you had, Mark, and I would certainly, I intend to adopt that for myself. So,
Well, I didn't want to bring up some old baggage, but talking about, making deals or whatever, and not communicating as a board before a meeting. But traditionally, the board would nominate the highest vote getter as the mayor pro tem. And there were some phone calls made prior to the meeting that I wasn't privy to. And so I think and a bunch of people told me that they didn't like the way that was handled either, but the board voted, spoke, move on. Then there was also another time when we were appointing planning board members. Several people from the audience I mean, attend, I don't think I've ever seen anyone attend a meeting and support a particular planning board nominee. And we had several in the audience that night, and I'd received numerous emails. And then despite that, right in their face, the board voted against their will. And I didn't hear one person speak up for the person that got the nod from the majority of the board. And so, I don't think we can pick and choose when we appear to be appropriate. The board feels like it's making decisions in the best interest of the town. I accept that, and I think that was the case here. I think as long as-
Commissioner Brownlow, were those items on the agenda when they were discussed? Mayor Pro Tem, appointment of planning board members?
Yes, yes.
Yes. Was discussion of legal services on the agenda?
Not-
Thank you.
But I wasn't privy to that either. I wasn't privy to that information. And anybody could have spoke up right then and said, I'd like to table this. I had the opportunity, every one of us had the opportunity to step up and table the information, or table the action that was being taken.
You're absolutely right. And I failed myself and a lot of other people by not doing so, because I'm going to tell you a real life story. I'm not going to say a lot of people. I'm going to say I walked into a local business with someone who's been here for over 30 years, who is a part owner. Always comes out and talks to me, having a discussion. He looked at me and he said, you know, I have been so proud of you for what you've tried to do in speaking up on behalf of the people of Emerald Isle while you've been in office. But I got to admit, I was really disappointed Tuesday night because you allowed a bully to control you. You did nothing to stop it. That made you a bully too.
Well, and at least I remember we spoke one time too, when I was making some comments about when I was campaigning. I spoke to a lot of people, and I heard of hundreds of people voice concerns they had about the town. And you made a comment to me, well, that's probably you didn't hear from the silent majority. You heard from those people, that was the comment you made to me.
I did.
And so, again, I haven't heard any comments myself personally. I haven't gotten any emails, phone calls, or any responses about the board meeting. I'm not saying it was right or wrong. I'm not taking a position in that. It's business, if you ask me. I don't think anybody should take anything personal here. If it's personal, we need to go in closed session. But it's business. It's, you know, is there a good way for a doctor to tell a person they got cancer? Probably not. All we did was ask for proposals. I did, at the prior meeting, question the 212% increase. And we could have talked about it then. I don't know if that's in the minutes or not, but I did. I brought that up, and it was silent for any discussion on that. So I believe that there was some introduction that there was something going on that I wasn't in favor of, a 212% increase in the legal counsel fees. And so I'm looking out for the taxpayers of Emerald Isle, the people who pay our taxes here, and spending. That's the biggest increase I saw in the budget, 212%. So I don't think anything was wrong with asking for proposals to just see if we're in line with anybody else's legal counsel fees. That's just my take. But again, I was not privy to information going into that meeting about that was going to happen. But since it was there and I already had my concerns about the increase, I voted the way I did, and I don't have any regrets.
I'd like to speak on something else too, Mr. Mayor. We had a comparison, and it's not really a legit comparison about our last attorney that we had. Attorney Stanley was here for a long time, and he had a different working relationship with the town and the way he did stuff. And you compare that to attorneys nationwide or citywide, and when you pick up the phone call to call them, they're going to charge you from 9 out of 10 of them is going to charge you. That's just the way it works. And Richard Stanley, for whatever reason, he didn't write it in the books. And now we're comparing it with people an attorney that didn't charge us probably 80% of the time when we called him up. He just did it out of the good end of his heart. Well, there's the groups that you get now in these other towns that we've got now, they're in it for the money, they're in it for the business. And now we're comparing it to somebody that's trying to make a dollar, make a living out of it. So the 212% is really not a good comparison because of the fact he never charged us for anything unless it was something that he had to really dig into. And you could call him up, and with his 20 years of experience and the quality he had, he knew the answer right away without having to research or do anything else. Where new groups coming in, especially new attorneys or attorneys that are not familiar with town government, it's going to take them a lot longer to dig into this stuff and figure out what the answers are. Whether they're charging $30 or $150, if it takes them an hour to do it or 30 minutes to do it, depends on what they're charging, what the cost is going to be. So we need to think about that too, also. And this isn't personal, so we really shouldn't be talking about this mayor pro tem stuff anymore, to be honest with you. That's personal.
Well, we're talking about being treated like, acting like bullies or people's comments about what they perceive. I've heard perceptions too about actions the board has taken on other issues. So it's just, and I was told, well, the board, that's the decision of the board. So we got to accept it and we move on. And again, everybody had the opportunity to slow it down and table it if they wanted to. I didn't hear about it until that night also, but again, the 212%. Matt, can I ask you, what is that 212%? What did that represent, please? Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Glad to help. Laura and I'll probably tag team this one together. So what you had for 40 of 42 years, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Stanley served 40 of a 42-year period as town attorney. And when I first arose in 2019, I was caught off guard actually by his pricing structure. Having managed 3 other communities very similar in size, the fees for legal will fluctuate from $50,000 to $100,000 a year, depending on what items you tackle, what problems you encounter. So my past experience, the 15 years prior to getting here, was of a community of 3,500 to 4,000 people, that your legal fees were running 50, 60, 75,000 per year on average. Now, that's going to be unique to the municipality. If you're in the middle of nowhere, you don't have a lot of problems, or if you're in an urban environment, you may have more. And you'll see that from our legal counsel survey. So we surveyed Atlantic Beach all the way down to Swansboro. So we asked Atlantic Beach, Cape Carteret, Cedar Point, Indian Beach, Moorhead, Newport, Pelletier, PKS, and Swansboro what their models are. Now, those models are going to vary drastically. In regard to Mr. Stanley, he's actually one of the finest gentlemen I've ever worked with, and you could call him at any given time. He would answer the call, and our prices would fluctuate between $12,000, $13,000, $14,000 a year. It really was around $1,200 a month on average. Most communities, that's going to be what the attorney charges just to attend the meeting. So it just depends on how many hours. If your meetings are longer, the costs are more. Our board has been very efficient. Our meetings are an hour and a half, 2 hours. I've been in with town boards that the meetings go to 11 or 12 o'clock at night, and the attorney charges for that. So to make it a much simpler answer, if you use the figure of $14,000 is what we usually would budget, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So Mr. Stanley's bills very rarely went above that. Now, if we were engaged in a lawsuit, if Mr. Stanley's involved in the lawsuit, he would bill appropriately. But if you have a major lawsuit, it usually kicks into your insurance policy. With us, it's the League of Municipalities. If we were being sued over a particular issue, we would get assigned counsel, we would have a deductible. So those numbers, you will see in legal fees, but those are unique one-off spins. For example, a property rights issue, a drowning, things like that may have a case. But in general, we would budget that $14,000 per year. When Mr. Stanley identified that he was going to retire in the fall of 2022, the previous board asked Mr. Stanley to research which firms would be municipally focused in the region and have good experience. If I recall, and I have to pull my data, but Mr. Stanley reached out to 3 different firms. 1 was too busy, 2 were interested. The previous board interviewed those 2 firms, and they made a selection. Brian Eads was appointed, and he served for about 5 months at the start of 2023. and his firm was really, really busy. He actually helped us defend a case years before. And so Brian decided that he wanted to help us, but he didn't have enough bandwidth. So then we went back to Grady Quattlebaum, and then they took over in May of 2023. Both of those styles of firms would bill based on hour, and their hourly wages will range from $150 to $265, depending on the type of firm, to the severity of the city's needs, and or whatever project that they are tackling. We oftentimes use specific firms if there's a personal tragedy, loss of life, or if there's a property issue, they specialize. When it came to Quattlebaum and Grady, they took over roughly the 1st of May, 2023, and we saw pretty standardized billings. They had to get on board. And then from July 1 to this current cycle, I believe, I'm not going to speak for Laura, let her speak. We were, as a staff, trying to anticipate, based on the previous 12 months of usage, what would the style and cost point look like going in the next 12 months? And so I'll let Laura pick up. She was preparing for the budget and put a figure in there, assuming that you would maintain that same level of service or the amount of calls in the next 12 months. Is that accurate? You were trying to plan ahead?
That's right. So you're right. So we had budgeted with Mr. Stanley's rates previously, and when we went into current fiscal year 24, we basically took what we had seen and extrapolated at the new rate, and that what we discovered that was too low with Mr. Brian Eads' firm. And so in the current budget, we amended, because we could see that ramping up of fees, service fees, almost like a bell curve, actually, if you look at these numbers. We amended the budget. We have a budget, I believe, of $90,000 in the current 24 budget. It tapered off. And so it's hard to see where you're going to head because it's a per use, it's not a fixed rate. So assuming that we don't have any further fees between the June 11th and the 30th, we would end with about a $60,000 expense, or what, 63, sorry, put my glasses back on. So I just wanted to mention, it is a budget, and if we don't utilize those residual fees, those will go to fund balance. And then looking into 25, we just kind of basically utilize that same trend. Saw it coming back down, want to be conservative just in case there is a legal issue, or, God forbid, there's probably going to be something that'll happen where we're going to have to engage, not just for procedural items, but, a legal issue. So we went ahead and proposed the 80,000. So those figures were from our office based on the trend, budget-wise. And so, anyway, I just wanted to kind of clarify that.
Thank you all.
Mr. Brownlow, if you want, the one other thing I would share for the good of the group, if we were trying to estimate from a procedural standpoint, having an attorney here at a board meeting and or having an attorney either present or participating in either planning board or a zoning appeal case, you can estimate, if you look at the chart, a normal month would have been September of 23 at 3,000, October at 3,000, January about 3,600, and then the April billing was 2,700. So if we were to normalize, there's probably a minimum charge of about 3,000 a month. So that's 36,000 a year for your base services. That's if you don't have any clerical issues, paralegal issues, procedural issues, rules of engagement, rules of procedure. But what we're seeing when somebody is asking a question about a particular site development question, it's cheaper for us to allow legal to opine on that and keep us out of hot water. So some of those months you'll see that blip up to 4,000 or 4,700, for example. There may have been more development activity, or there may have been more questions. So what we were trying to do was, we know what the basement is. We were trying to figure out where the ceiling's at and find a number in between those two that we would not have to come back for a budget adjustment 12 months from today in June of 2025, and hopefully you come in under that number. So that's where I think the proposed 212% jump comes. Does that make logical sense to the board?
I think there's a lot of factors that go into selecting legal representation. Cost is certainly one of them. I'm sure there are firms that would like the idea of representing a municipality, particularly Emerald Isle, so there should be some consideration of that in the business model that they propose to us. There's the risk tolerance and the style of the individuals that get assigned to support us. How airtight does a letter telling somebody to remove trash from their front yard need to be? There's their proximity, how often are they here, how often are they in the community? How do we fit into their portfolio of business among all their other customers? What styles of law are represented within their firm, and what do we have access to? And importantly, to what extent do they leverage paralegals or legal interns that do some of the more routine things at a much lower rate? So all of those factors, I think, need to come into balance. And I think Mr. Stanley's model was one that made a lot of sense, because if you call and he can answer your question in under 5 minutes, is it really worth billing, the effort of recording it and billing it, or is that part of the goodwill between you and the town that you represent? So I see the merits in that, and I think those are all the factors that we should consider as we look at other sources of legal services.
I make a motion to rescind the action taken on June 11th regarding legal counsel for the town of Emerald Isle.
Before we do that, can I ask one question? Because it's going to have a lot to do with my vote. Mark, you've been here 8 years?
Yes.
Matt, you've ran towns for how long? 5. As far as procedure goes, how off were we the other night? In other words, if you were having to hire an attorney right now, let's say she stepped out, something happened, we had to get a new attorney, what would your procedure have been? In other words, like I say, I'm getting a lot of feedback, and I feel like the way we did it was wrong. So going into something like this in the future, being that you have 1, 2, 3, 4 new people up here who haven't done it, when it comes to procedures of how these meetings are ran, we're learning. At the end of the day, I'm not going to be able to just soak up all the knowledge after 2 or 3 meetings. How off were we the other night? Freely speaking.
I object to that question, because that's kind of putting our manager in the spot to answer an awkward question.
I don't think it's an awkward question. I think it's a question that comes from experience.
I can answer it we're at the same level here. It was very, very unprofessional, it was very embarrassing looking back on it, watching where we reacted and stuff. And of all my time that I've been 6 years as a commissioner, 2 years on the planning board, and it never happened. I've never seen that kind of behavior ever happen, what I've noticed that I've served on. So it's probably, in my opinion, the lowest time that I've ever acted on a board here at Emerald Isle. So if that helps you.
Okay. Well,
That's where I'm at on that right there.
with that said, so you don't think there was anything wrong with saying, hey, we're here to look out for cost. We should talk to people about other legal services, see if we can save the town money. You agree with that part of it?
Yeah, I think we're always looking to save the town money, so I don't see that's our job up here, to always look at better ways and to save the taxpayers' money, because our ultimate goal as a commissioner is to keep the tax rate low and not to raise taxes. But at the same sense, our ultimate goal is to, it goes in a 2-part series. We've got to have the right people in the right positions, and there's a difference between something that costs cheap and you get cheap results, or you have to pay up for certain things to make things right. If you look at Emerald Isle right now, Emerald Isle is kind of like, we're the what do you want to call it, the little star of the whole area of Carteret County. We're the hot spot. This is where everybody wants to come, this is where everybody wants to vacation. And if we don't have the right legal representation to protect us, there's lawsuits that pop against us all the time that a lot of the general public never even hears about them as commissioners. I mean, they pop up every year, and people look at us in ways that say, hey, that's a free money ride. So we got to have the right people representing us at all times because of the hot spot that we sit in. So that's something to think about too. I mean, sometimes you have to pay up to get the quality that you want. You compare it to any other service or anything you do. You pay for what you get. I guess that's the best way to say it.
If I may, just not talking over anybody, not telling anybody not to talk about anything, professionally, politely, I think everybody in the room is at least understanding or aware of, I don't think there's any question about how all 5 of you feel about how Tuesday night went. We can still talk about it, but I'd like to try to gently steer it back to item number 6, the line item of what are we going to do about legal representation. So not cutting anybody off, not talking over anybody. Everybody's opinion is just as important as the next person's, but I think everybody's on the same page, whether they agree or not, on how Tuesday night played out. So I don't want to, excuse me, I don't want us to go too far down that rabbit hole. So if I could gently steer us back to item number 6, and Commissioner Sanderson, you had a motion. I'm sorry, you'll have to repeat it, and we'll go from there.
I make a motion to rescind the action taken regarding legal counsel on June 11th at our regular board meeting.
Okay, Commissioner Sanderson has a motion to rescind the action to seek legal counsel, alternative legal
To
counsel.
replace
Is that
legal
correct?
counsel.
Is that correct? All right, the motion.
Was the motion the other night?
It wasn't to replace.
It was to get proposals, I
was to
believe.
seek, yes, to seek.
Only,
right.
only for proposals.
Okay, then that's the action, so I make a motion that we rescind the action taken regarding legal counsel at the June 11th meeting.
Okay, all right, the motion is on the floor. All in favor?
Aye.
There's 2. Any opposed?
Aye.
Is that a no vote from you, sir?
No, I haven't voted. Like I say, this is just a hard spot because I feel like there's nothing wrong with looking at legal counsel. But how it was done, I don't agree with. Therefore, if we want to bring it up later on, let's bring it up. But I felt bad about my vote the other night, therefore I will rescind my vote because I don't think it was done the right way.
Okay, all right. Correct me if I'm wrong, that was a 3-2 to rescind the action. In light of a 3-2, we currently do not have legal representation from the town. So before we move into item 7, as far as procedures to contact legal, I'll ask for board discussion and another direction to staff by way of motion and vote on what we're going to do about securing attorney. I'll turn it back over to you all.
I mean, at this point, we have no attorney. So we've got to do the same thing, which is try to find an attorney. So therefore, it's the same thing.
Would it take a motion to put it back into progress again?
Well, I mean, we've got to have a motion to somehow procure an attorney. So,
I make a motion that we begin a process to secure legal counsel, take proposals.
Okay. Matt, help me here, please. There's a motion to seek proposals. What clarification would your office need? And just to hopefully assist your motion, what clarification does your office need? How many proposals, timeline, interview process? We need to cover those bases, am I correct?
Yes, sir. So keep in mind that Emerald Isle had only had the change of an attorney one time in basically 4 decades. The previous time, they leaned on the seated attorney to help with the selection process. So now you're vacant and you don't have that resource. If you want to get requests either for proposals or qualifications, so RFPs or RFQs, just tell us how you would like us to frame it. And then are there requirements for, do they have to have a minimum number of years of service in municipalities and public sector work? What is it that, what frame box do you want us to do it? And then we'll gladly put it all together. We'll take care of it today. And then the time frame to advertise. Because if we are without legal counsel today, the theory is you'd theoretically be without counsel on the 9th of July as well. So any advice you can give us on how you would like us to proceed, the more defined you can make your request, the easier it will be for staff to help you achieve your goal.
Can we get assistance from the League of Municipalities and or the Institute of Government?
Fortunately, I think we call them God moments or winks, that I'm headed to the league today. so I can confer with legal counsel there to see if there's any interim support or recommendation for interim support until you fully appoint. Regarding the School of Government, we always have that resource, but they don't serve as your legal appointed counsel that will guide you in an area of specialty. So I think that the first step is probably the league.
And I think we should follow their guidelines when hiring legal counsel. I think that's a good place to start. They should have that outlined. And
I think they may have some things you can't do, and I'm not trying to make this childlike at all, but the analogy you could draw here is you can tell a kindergartner the 5 things they should do, because you can't tell them the 995 things they can't do. So the School of Government will say to you, you probably shouldn't do these 1, 2, or 3 things. Since this attorney works at the pleasure of the 6 of you, it's really up to you how you would like to advertise, interview, select, appoint, length of term, cost, areas of specialty. So without sounding trite, the ball is 99.98% in your court.
Can you do a public notice, just as we do for other things, and ask folks that are interested in representing the town to submit a letter of interest and whatever qualifications they think are relevant, and see what kind of a pool we get? If we get 0, that's one thing. If we get 100, then that's a different problem.
Yes, sir, you could do that. You could make an advertisement asking for letters of intent. You could set a deadline for that,
Give
whatever
them a
you
week,
choose.
yeah.
Whatever you
Out there
choose
for
to
a
do.
week.
So Commissioner Brownlee, not to get too muddy past your motion there, I'm going to definitely entertain the motion. I know the next questions from staff will be, well, we hear you. How exactly would you like us to proceed? I mean, they're pretty good individually and as a group of following direction there. So I just would hope at the end of the motion that they would have little to no question on how the board as a whole and you would like them to proceed. So get to your motion. Any discussion or suggestions on how long we're going to advertise, what the criteria would be, how long we're going to keep it open, that kind of thing. Doesn't have to be ridiculously granular, but so that staff leaves with some direction would be helpful, sir.
Mayor?
Yes.
And also, you have a handful of firms that are currently working in the region. If you want us to reach out to any of them, just let us know. We'll gladly. For Commissioner Wooten, when you're thinking about that time period, unless we directly solicit, and I'll just speak, I'll let Laura, we don't have a lot of feedback normally if you make a public posting and then don't solicit, especially if you give a 7-day time frame. So I'm not disagreeing with you in any way, shape, or form, but to secure from a legal firm, you may have to start reaching out to them. They may not be there watching for that posting.
Yep.
So, and we don't necessarily have a listserv like we do. We have a list of contractors and other things that we oftentimes target. So just give us some advice there on how you'd like us to proceed.
Maybe start with the folks identified on this sheet that represent other municipalities that are nearby, along with a public announcement, and gauging interest in representing us.
Matt, based on your experience, would the survey that you have here, is that a decent enough place to start, and or plus a public notice? Just trying to get some help for my board members here. Is that a reasonable place to start? Not telling you to start from there, but we're starting from ground zero here. We need an attorney. I don't have the experience on how to go find a municipal attorney. I mean, I've got ideas, but I'd be talking out of school, as they say. So,
could we get legal counsel on retainer temporarily?
So there's a couple of things if you want. So the existing 2 board members that were involved in the last process would be Mr. Taylor and Mayor Holland. So when we did the survey about 2 years ago, the pool wasn't deep. And that's unfortunately when we ran into it, that when we look at services, if you're in that area of specialization in municipal law, you probably have a lot of work. And so that's why Obviously, your goal was to try to stay as close to, if you had inside the boundaries of Emerald Isle, you had a municipally specialized attorney, you often look at him or her, and then you went into Carteret County, you oftentimes look at them, and since we're adjoining, you try to get geographically your attorney as close as possible. The first firm selected was out of Wilmington, the second firm was out of New Bern, and you'll see that there is some real distance being traveled for our adjoining and neighboring communities where those law firms are at. So,
Matt, real quick,
Yeah.
generally do the attorneys charge for their travel time also?
that's going to be in your negotiations. Many do charge for travel. Some charge just IRS mileage during travel. Some charge port to port. Some will have a retainer fee. So you'll see that 2 out of the representative communities have a minimum $1,500 per month retainer, which allows them to get up to their first 10 hours inside of that retainer. That's a model that you can look at as well. That would absorb potentially, unless you have a super long meeting, could get their travel to during the meeting and their travel back. So there's oftentimes, there's such a variance of model. But yes, sir, travel can be charged. IRS is something that we've seen in the past, and then some firms don't charge you for travel.
Just a quick question, just to help me with this whole process. It might go into Laura a little bit. Rough numbers, Laura, but on track, if this was to continue out for the remainder of the year on average, what do you think we would get? Because I was looking at Morehead City has $140,000 for their attorney right now and their own staff now. Where are we at as far as end of the year charges, roughly, just estimating out if we were to continue on the path we're on right now?
Oh, I think if we had finished out the year with Grady Quattlebaum, probably 70,000 for this current fiscal year, yeah.
Okay, so that's half
And,
of what that is.
and we had, I think the 80,000 was conservative, you know, for the upcoming budget for 25. And so that was, again, just to protect, you know, had we had some issues that would cause a lot of legal, then we would come to the board and request a budget amendment to adjust for it. But that's where we have, that's our current budget, and that's where we were tracking with the current model.
Okay, thank you.
Can I share something on that line of what we've done to cost cut in those areas? So if you'll see, the August 15th bill was high of 2023. The February 19th bill, which would have been the previous 30 days, was high, 12,000. So you take those blips out of the radar, and what we were doing as staff is we were severely limiting our communication to the attorney. We only called when absolutely necessary. So for us, Quattlebaum and Grady was fully aware of their usage, and they even gave us a 10% discount on our first invoice when they sent 2 attorneys for our meetings in the first quarter. They didn't charge us for the second attorney. They did a lot of steps to help us save, and there's substantial savings in the reflected bill. I think, again, the greatest opportunity for savings here is going to be the policy that you establish, because sometimes there's questions being raised that have or could have been answered at a much different or lower level. And if you want, when you're really thinking about how much you want to expend, I think Commissioner Taylor indicated you probably want to get the best person you can afford to have, because you pay me now or pay me later. A little bit up front can save you tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars in a lawsuit. I think that as you go forward, establish when you want us to launch this advertisement. I'm picking up today, and then how long do you want it to run? We'll also try to find temporary legal service support. We could ask, I don't know if you want to ask Grady Quattlebaum or not, if they will help us through the month of July. That's an option too. So just whatever direction you want to give us, and I promise you we will execute it.
Excuse me, Matt, and I'd like to qualify that they're certainly welcome to submit a proposal and be competitive if, you know, no problem there. But talking about the, you know, when you're paying want the best and top quality, I agree. I don't mind paying for the best, but there was an incident where we voted on something in the absence of the mayor, and And we didn't receive very good legal counsel, if any, on that until we had to come back and do another vote on it. And to me, that was a drop ball, but in performance of our legal counsel. But, you know, I'm not going to throw stones because I've made plenty of mistakes in my career and publicly, you know, so I'm just, but if we're going to pay top dollar, you know, I expect that's what we should get. But I do welcome them to resubmit and get in line with the competition.
Matt, has anyone, and I don't even know if they would consider it now, after June 11th, but has anyone tried to even negotiate either hourly rates or other cost-saving measures with Grady and Quattlebaum?
No,
We had
ma'am.
the opportunity, did we?
No. The answer to your question is no.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right.
It may be out of line for me here to speak to this, but at the sake of trying to be helpful, it's not their hourly charge. It's the number of hours that the town of Emerald Isle is requesting of services and the redundancy of those questions that are resulting in a high figure. We as staff have limited our communication and engagement to what is standard, normal, and customary.
You know, and to support what Matt just said, I was looking at the invoices right here, and there's an anomaly in February's legal counsel bill, which it was going $4,000, $3,000, all of a sudden $12,500, then $7,000, then back down to your $4,000, $2,000. So I don't know what that big jump was, and it was the February invoice of 23, 24, but that's quite an anomaly.
Yes, sir. There was a lot of questions. There was a lot of questions presented by the new board in the month of January as to how you were choosing to move forward, who you wanted to employ or not employ, and how you wanted to provide services to the community. And all of those conversations were direct from the board to legal, and not any of that came through staff. So that was relegated to your team, and then the bill showed up, and there was the ow factor for us. We were, oh, well, maybe there's a numerical error here, but it was, and it was based on usage.
So in reality, that's the policy that if we could develop something like that among the group up here, we could stop that 12,000 from ever happening again by working as a team of five and letting the mayor speak for us once we decide what we want to ask. I really think we need to move that way.
All right, we'll get to number 7 there, Commissioner Taylor. Definitely on the agenda to be discussed. Back to Commissioner Brownlow's original motion there to seek proposals for legal services. I'm going to bring it back to you. I know we've had a lot of discussion. I think it's a good thing. But if you would clarify your motion on what you would like the board to agree to see happen going forward, as far as not protocol for contacting the current attorney, but procuring legal representation for the town.
Well, I guess, anybody?
I'll offer what I
Amend
think.
my motion?
I can offer what I think I heard was public announcement today or as soon as practical, run it for a week or 10 days, make sure we reach out to the attorneys on the other local municipalities that are on the list that was provided, ping the League of Municipalities if there's any fruit to be had there. Set, as I said, a relatively short timeline to get letters of interest, or even if they want to give letter proposals to outline the basics of their qualifications and business model. Then we'll have something to react to.
All right, so there's a motion
Made and amended.
made and amended to instruct staff to provide public notice to extend for a period, starting today and extending for how long?
I think we should also solicit.
Yeah, I'm
Okay,
coming to
that's
that
it,
part,
okay.
yes, sir. So for the public notice part, it starts today and extends for how long? Commissioner Wood suggested 10 days, but it's your motion, so I'm trying to.
What's an average solicitation time for putting out for bids for any other proposal?
Minimum 14 to 30 days.
I think we need something sooner. Is 10 days reasonable? Sound reasonable?
May I suggest that you're coming into the holiday, 14 days from today would make it July 3rd. That might be a reasonable date.
14 days.
Is that okay? Mr. Wooten, is that all right? Yeah.
Today to extend for 14 days, as well as staff, instructing staff to solicit the firms on the Legal Counsel survey June 2024. Is that correct? To gauge their interest in submitting a letter of intent or a proposal, is that correct?
Yes, as well as solicit any other proposals, yes.
Okay, all right. All right, that motion is on the floor. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Mark, what was your vote? What was your vote? I'm sorry. Or did you vote?
I didn't vote. Trying to, I was listening to
Okay.
the way it was twisted up and everything so much. I know we need legal representation, just so wrapped up in the way it played out. It's just terrible.
Well, let's get
past.
past that one, and then
Yeah.
if there's more discussion and another vote or another motion, that's fine. Let's not.
Read the motion to me one more time.
The motion was to instruct staff to seek alternatives for legal counsel, including a public notice that starts today and extends for 14 days, as well as soliciting at a minimum the names of the firms on the legal counsel survey that you have in front of you, and any others that might be qualified to be in the running.
Yeah, I'm going to vote against that because I'm happy with that we have some mine as a no.
Okay, so was that a 3-2?
Yeah.
You vote.
But we don't have anybody, correct?
We currently do not have anybody.
So, I mean, we've got to solicit something.
Okay, all right. Well,
Go ahead, that's my vote.
we have a 3-2 vote. Am I counting correctly? Okay, 3-2 to carry the motion by Commissioner Brownlow. All right. That part is handled.
Mayor Holland, I'm going to reaffirm that if that's okay.
Yes.
So we know what we're doing.
Yes,
So
sir.
today, at the conclusion of this meeting, myself and the town clerk will draft a public announcement. We'll identify that the town of Emerald Isle is currently seeking letters of intent for legal representation. We will produce that notification today, run it through 5:00 p.m. on July the 3rd, which should be a Wednesday, 14 days total from today. In those letters of intent, we'll seek information including capacity of said firm, years of service, any municipal experience, and any other pertinent data that would help their cause to be potentially a candidate in this case. My office will also physically and verbally communicate with the League of Municipalities today and tomorrow regarding temporary support in whatever period that may exist. And then what other step we will take is once we draft the letters of intent, in addition to posting them publicly on our website and all of our outlets, we will directly send and look for contact information for the attorneys listed on the Legal Counsel survey for our area of representation and solicit from them as well. Does that sound what the board would like to have us do?
Anyone have objection to that?
You might just summarize it as qualifications as opposed to breaking out all the different parts of it, but a letter that expresses their qualifications
So
represent the town.
if you were having me to draft it, I would do capacity, years of service, municipal experience, and/or basic resume. If you don't want that, please advise differently.
May I ask a question too, just with that whole thing? And I don't know if he's practiced anymore or not, but if we don't have legal representation, we've got a gentleman, if he's willing to come back and fill in for a little bit, if we have nobody sitting in the chair, I would make a recommendation that we ask Attorney Stanley to step in if possible.
That's a great idea.
I would love to have him come back till we
That's a
find
great question.
the right
We'll
spot.
see if Richard will do it.
All right, so there's a
That's a great
discussion
idea.
open by Commissioner Taylor about reaching out to former counselor Richard Stanley to gauge his willingness to help us in the short term while we work through procuring another attorney.
Is that a motion?
It wasn't a motion yet, it was a suggestion,
It's
so.
a suggestion, but I will make it a motion if you're good for that. I'd like to
Yep.
make a motion at this time
Okay.
that we ask management and staff to please reach out to Attorney Stanley and request a fill-in position
For how long of a period of time, or do we need to have that right now?
until we
As
sign.
needed basis?
until.
Indefinitely?
Hopefully until you get somebody on staff.
Okay, so on an as-needed basis indefinitely, asking Richard Stanley to fill in for us while we work through procuring counsel. That was a motion by you, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I think that's a great idea. Just having spoken to someone who's very close to Attorney Stanley's wife recently, I don't know how practical it is to ask at this point due to some health issues. I'm not suggesting that we not pursue it, but I would ask us to do so very delicately based on the situations that they are facing.
Is that something you could do, Alicia, tactfully?
I am not comfortable.
Okay.
I just don't
Okay.
think it's a good time.
Okay.
But a representative of the town is certainly welcome to do that if they see it differently. And not that I disagree at all, that he would be absolutely wonderful.
If I could add to that, one board member, two board member, if you guys decide to carry the motion, in the short time that I was able to work with Mr. Stanley was a very short period of time. Matt, you and Mr. Stanley had a very solid working relationship. I would trust that relationship, and I would trust Matt's, and very much Matt's ability to gently offer that proposal, and I think he could offer it in a way that if Mr. Stanley was ready, willing, and able, he would, but also in a way that if he wasn't, he wouldn't feel pressure in any way to do so.
Thank you.
Just my 2 cents worth.
And I also think with today's technology, there's, and we've had this happen in previous meetings, if he does accept it, I see no problem with him monitoring our meetings via online at the same point too. I have no problem with that at all,
Okay.
if he'll accept it.
All right, the motion is on the floor for a general invitation to Mr. Stanley to help us out in the short term until we find a full-time attorney. All in favor?
And before we vote on that, is there any, like, in case he declines, is there anybody on this list? I've worked with Neil Whitford for years. When I was at Pine Short 10 years, I worked, Kirkman and Whitford and Brady. I wonder if, as a backup, could we, anybody, any objections if we ask them if Mr. Stanley declines?
I have a motion to follow this one, Commissioner Brownlow, in reference to that.
Okay.
All right, let's get the Stanley motion carried or not. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that's a 5-0 for the ayes. All right.
I make a motion that in the event that Matt cannot secure legal advisors on an interim basis through the league or another avenue available to us, the Institute of Government, and that former attorney Richard Stanley not be interested or not ready to step back into that role, that we seek out some of the interim attorneys that are currently working in this area. I know that the county has an interim attorney, Swansboro has an interim attorney, and I don't know anything about those attorneys, but apparently they have local government experience, and I think it would be wise to reach out to them at least on an interim basis, and to also invite them to submit a letter of interest.
Okay,
Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
all right. Motion is on the floor to also solicit surrounding municipalities' interim attorneys to gauge their interest in helping us in the interim.
Yes, sir.
All right. Motion is on the floor by Commissioner Sanderson. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that motion is also carried. Any more discussion regarding legal services or the route to procure legal services before we move on to item number 7? All right. Was that a yes?
None.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Item number 7 would be procedures pertaining to legal counsel, and you might correct me if I'm wrong. This is to establish or to attempt to establish protocol for contacting our town attorney, for staff contacting our town attorney, for the board, either one board member, two board members, three board members acting individually or as a group or as a whole. Like you guys have talked about earlier in the meeting and before, if the attorney's $50 an hour, the attorney's $500 an hour, how much, how often, and what they're contacted for obviously has significant bearing on the cost. I'm happy to help. I'm happy to not help. I'm happy to carry it any way that the board sees fit. So I want to open up the discussion to the board as far as trying to establish a protocol for controlling the cost that is an as-needed basis. So I'll turn it back over to you all and let you go from there.
Well, I talked earlier about it, so,
Yeah, I like the
I talked that in
guidelines.
turn.
Oh, sorry.
yeah, I just talked out of turn on it, but that's, you know, I think, it should be up to the discussion to try to figure out a couple steps that we should do it. But I think it's definitely a, benefit to our citizens and our budget, how we roll with this moving forward. It's a perfect time to establish our rules as commissioners, how we're gonna handle this. So, you've heard what I said. I said it out of place, but you heard what I said, so comment on it. Speak.
And I wasn't trying to correct you, Mark, I just wanted to
No, that's good.
keep them in order and
No,
not
that's what
mix.
that's what your job's for.
Yes,
so
sir.
I'm glad you did it.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
All right.
I
so-
make a motion that, since we don't act as individuals, we are one board, that should any of us individually or as a group of two, maybe three sometimes, but that questions for the attorney be directed to either the town manager, as it is in most municipalities, or to the mayor, or relay to the town manager, because from the questions that I'm seeing on these invoices, the majority of these things posed by elected officials.
Let's not get too granular.
I won't.
Sure.
That was it.
Sure, okay, yeah. We don't have an attorney here, so I don't want to mess anything up.
99.5% of those questions could have been answered by staff via historical data. So that being the case, then a verbal consensus of the board would determine whether it's the manager or the mayor, that move forward to the attorney.
So you're, and that was a motion?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so if I'm understanding you correctly, you're making a motion that the protocol for contacting the town attorney, the one or more board members contacting the town attorney directly would come via way of at least a consensus of the board?
Verbally.
Meaning 3 members, either to the manager or to myself, and then the question would be either answered by town staff or posed to the attorney?
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Before we vote on it, I want to discuss, go ahead, Jay.
No, I would just say, I think as a practice, that is the way to do it. I just don't want to constrain ourselves so that if a individual person feels they need to avail themselves of legal advice, that we're not precluding them in that, whatever the situation is. We're not saying you can't do it, but we're saying our guideline and our preference is to act as you described.
And with that procedure, is the procedure in attaining the majority of the board, or however it might be, to proceed contacting that legal counsel, would that be done like you poll the commissioners, like we've done in the past?
Let's just say, since you and I are talking about it, if I'm understanding correctly, if you had a question for legal, said, I wanted to ask the attorney about this. Like, okay, well, there's a question there. Is anybody else needing to hear from the attorney on it? I can check with staff, see if there is a ironclad answer to the question. If there's not an ironclad answer to the question, if I hear from any two other board members individually that, hey, yeah, we need some clarification, then we can reach out to the attorney. That's my understanding. Somebody feel free to correct me if I'm
That
wrong.
was the intent.
Yeah, I would just like, because I wouldn't like to be able to just stop at 3 commissioners. I already got the majority, that's all I need, and now I'm gonna go ahead and submit it.
Yeah, no, if you
Because
have
I think all
entire board
5
consensus, that'd be fantastic.
all 5 need to know, the voting board needs to know that someone's requesting legal assistance.
I'll amend my motion to reflect that.
Okay, so the motion is amended that either by a 5-member, not all at the same time, but if the manager or mayor would need to hear from all 5 commissioners before posing a question to legal.
And that needs to be noted that that can be communicated individually, verbally. We don't need a special meeting for that.
Correct.
And to just make sure I understand, and out of the 5, if 3 agree to it, to move forward to the attorney, then it moves forward. But if,
Correct.
so it's still, all 5 of us know what the question is, but 3 have to agree to it.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I heard you when you said, I would highly recommend that the board tables this conversation until you have legal representation to guide you in this process,
Yep.
because we're not in a position to be making that decision as staff.
I withdraw my motion.
Motion's withdrawn. Is there a motion to table it until the July meeting, assuming that we'll have some form of legal representation that can help us guide through that?
Table it till the first meeting with the new attorney.
That could be a long time, but
Oh, we
yeah,
wanna have
doesn't matter,
advice. Yeah,
but,
we do want to have advice.
okay, so there's a motion to table it until we have legal representation. Table the protocol for contacting legal until we have legal representation that can walk us through it. That motion is on the floor. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that motion is carried. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Jason.